Learning objectives. After completing this module, learners will be able to understand and describe the birth of the Weimar Republic and effects of World War I. Understand and elaborate on the political radicalization and the economic crises in Germany. Understand and describe rise of Hitler to power and subsequent destruction of democracy. Understand and describe the role of Germany in initiating World War II. Understand and describe genocide by Hitler and his youth wing. Understand and explain Hitler's emphasis on motherhood and skillful propaganda to promote Nazism. Understand and describe the impact of Nazism on ordinary people and revelation of the Holocaust. Birth of Weimar Republic. Germany was a powerful empire in the beginning of the 20th century. It fought the First World War 1914 to 1918 alongside the Austrian Empire and against the Allies, England, France and Russia. Germany did succeed in occupying France and Belgium initially, but the Allies were joined by the US in 1917. Together, they defeated Germany and the Central Powers in 1918. The defeat of the Imperial Germany gave way to a democratic republic. The parliamentary parties met at Weimar and established a democratic constitution with a federal structure. Through the peace treaty at Versailles, Germany lost its overseas colonies, a tenth of its population, 13% of its territories, 75% of its iron, and 26% of its coal to France, Poland, Denmark, and Lithuania. To weaken Germany, the Allied powers demilitarized it. The War Guilt Clause, holding Germany responsible for the war, forced it to pay a compensation of £6 billion. The Allies also took over the resource-rich Rhineland for much part of the 1920s. The effects of war. The war devastated Europe. From being a continent of creditors, it became a debtor. Though the truth was otherwise, soldiers and their life in bunkers was glorified after World War I. Aggressive war propaganda and national honor gained utmost importance in the public sphere. Democracy was a feeble idea that failed to survive the war-torn Europe. Political radicalism and economic crises. The formation of Weimar Republic and the uprising of the Spartacist League took place simultaneously. The Socialists, Democrats and Catholic who opposed the Spartacus movement formed the Weimar Republic, which suppressed the uprising. The Spartakists later founded the Communist Party of Germany. The economic crisis of 1923 heightened political radicalization. Payment of war reparations depleted Germany's gold reserves. In 1923, when Germany refused to pay the war reparations, France occupied its leading industrial area, Ruhr, to claim coal. In retaliation, Germany recklessly printed paper currency which reduced the value of the mark. Price of goods soared, causing hyperinflation. Eventually, America intervened and reworked the terms of reparation to save Germany from excessive financial burden. The years of depression. The short-term loans by America gave temporary stability to Germany's investments and industrial recovery between 1924 and 1928. But in 1929, the Wall Street exchange crashed, and America withdrew this support. Thus began the Great Economic Depression. The German economy was hit hard. The unemployed workforce touched a record 6 million. Small businessmen, retailers, and self-employed people feared proletarianization, fear of being reduced to working class or unemployed. The politically weak Weimar Republic had some inherent defects. Proportional representation, which made victory of any one party impossible. Article 48, which gave the President the powers to impose emergency, suspend civil rights, and rule by decree. People were disillusioned with the democratic parliamentary system, which failed to offer solutions. Hitler's rise to power. Hitler was born in Austria in 1889. His bravery won him many medals in the army. The injustice meted out to Germany after World War I infuriated him. In 1919, he joined the German Workers' Party, which was renamed the National Socialist German Workers' Party. Later on, it became the Nazi Party. Till early 1930, the Nazis were not popular. During the Great Depression in 1919, Nazism became a mass movement. It invoked hopes of a better future. By 1932, it became the largest party with 37% votes. Hitler's oratorical skills moved people. Nazi propaganda projected him as a savior to the Germans. He effectively used the red banners with swastika symbol, pamphlets, and ritualized rounds of applause during his massive rallies. The destruction of democracy. On 30 January 1933, President Hindenburg offered the chancellorship, the highest position in the cabinet of ministers, to Hitler. Once in power, Hitler began the process of dismantling the structure of democracy. A mysterious fire that broke out in the German Parliament building in February gave Hitler an excuse to assume all power. He announced a fire decree on 28 February 1933, which suspended all civic rights. Through the infamous Enabling Act passed on 3 March 1933, Hitler established dictatorship in Germany. All political parties and trade unions were banned. The police was given power to rule with impunity. Reconstruction. Economist Hjalmar Schacht was given the responsibility of economic recovery. He envisaged full production and full employment through a state-funded work creation program. Hitler deliberately pulled out of the League of Nations in 1933, reoccupied the Rhineland in 1936, and integrated Austria and Germany in 1938 under the slogan, "One People, One Empire, and One Leader." He wrested German-speaking Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia and took over the entire country. Schacht advised him against huge investments in rearmament, but Hitler considered war as the only way out of the economic crisis. Schacht had to leave. The German invasion of Poland in 3rd September 1939 triggered a war with England and France. A tripartite pact signed between Germany, Italy, and Japan in September 1940 strengthened Hitler's international power. Hitler attacked the Soviet Union in June 1941. The attack exposed the Western Front of Germany to British aerial bombing and the Eastern Front to the Soviet armies. Germany faced a humiliating defeat. The Soviet armies reached the heart of Berlin. It established Soviet hegemony on Eastern Europe for almost half a century thereafter. The USA resisted participation in the war during all these developments. In a bid to extend its power in the East and support Hitler, Japan bombed the US naval ship at Pearl Harbor. The World War II came to an end on 15th August 1945 after Japan surrendered. In May 1945, only the European theatre stopped the war, but it continued as Japan didn't surrender before the atomic bombs on 6th and 9th August 1945, respectively. The Nazi worldview. The Nazi ideology believed in a racial hierarchy. Hitler considered Nordic German Aryans to be the finest race and the Jews the worst. He wanted the Aryan race to retain its purity, become stronger, and dominate the world. Hitler misinterpreted the ideas of Darwin and Spencer to his convenience. Charles Darwin elaborated on the process of natural evolution, and Herbert Spencer proposed the theory of survival of the fittest. None of them advocated human intervention. But Hitler used human intervention to eliminate races he was prejudiced against. Hitler's ideology also related to the geopolitical concept of Lebensraum, or living space. He advocated acquiring new territories to spread the race of the Nordic German Aryans and also enhance material resources and power of Germany. Establishment of racial state. The Nazis wanted only a society of pure and healthy Nordic Aryans. They alone were desirable. The undesirables included Jews, Gypsies, blacks, Russians, Poles, and even mentally or physically unfit Germans. Gypsies and blacks were widely persecuted. Mentally and physically unfit Germans were killed under the euthanasia program. Jews suffered the most amongst these. Hitler believed in pseudo-scientific theory of races, according to which the only solution to the menace of Jews was eliminating the race. From 1933 to 1938, the Nazis terrorized, pauperized, and segregated the Jews, forcing them to leave the country. From 1939 to 1945, the Jews were concentrated in certain areas and later killed in gas chambers in Poland. The racial utopia. Hitler used war as a means for genocide. Much of the northwestern Poland was annexed to Germany. The Poles were forced to leave their homes and property behind to be used by the ethnic Germans brought in from occupied Europe. The Poles were taken to the other part called the General Government, where they were eventually killed. Youth in Nazi Germany. Hitler felt that a strong Nazi society could be established only by teaching children Nazi ideology. All schools were cleansed and purified by dismissing Jew teachers. The German and Jew students could neither sit together nor play with each other. The undesirable children, including Jews, gypsies, or physically handicapped, were thrown out of the school and subsequently taken to gas chambers. Textbooks were rewritten to justify the Nazi ideas of race. Children were taught to be loyal and submissive, hate Jews, and worship Hitler. All sports were meant to inculcate a spirit of violence and aggression in students. Children as young as 10 years old had to join Jungvolk. At 14, it was mandatory for all boys to join the Nazi youth organization, Hitler Youth. At 18, they were forced to join the labor service. The Nazi cult of motherhood. Children in Nazi Germany were brainwashed into believing that the fight for equal rights for men and women was wrong and it would destroy society. Boys were taught to be steel-hearted, aggressive, and masculine, while girls were instructed to be good mothers and bring up pure-blooded Aryan children. Girls were supposed to maintain distance from the Jews to maintain the purity of their race. Their sole duty was to take care of their home and teach Nazi values to their children. They were encouraged to produce many children through awards. They had to be the bearers of the Aryan culture and race. Any deviation from the prescribed code of conduct invited severe punishment and public condemnation of that Aryan woman. The art of propaganda. The Nazi regime used language and media with great care. Mass killing was termed as specialist treatment final solution for the Jews, euthanasia for the disabled, etc. Visual images, films, radio, posters, catchy slogans and leaflets were used to promote Nazi ideas and spread hatred against the Jews. With this propaganda, people actually started to believe that Nazism alone could bring them peace and prosperity. Nazism successfully worked on the minds of the people. They turned their hate and anger towards those considered as undesirable. There was some active resistance against Nazism, but a majority of Germans remained passive onlookers. Ordinary people and crimes against humanity. The ordinary lot was deeply impacted by the Nazi propaganda. It began to look at the world through Nazi perspective. The sight of Jews angered people. The thought that Nazism alone could bring them prosperity got deeply ingrained in them. At one point of time, even the Jews began to believe in the Nazi stereotypes about them. They imagined their hooked noses, black hair and eyes, Jewish looks and body movements. Not all Germans were Nazis. Those against Nazi ideas organized active resistance but were faced with brutal repression and death. A majority of Germans acted as mere spectators. They were too scared to act, to defer, to protest. Knowledge about the Holocaust. Information about Nazi atrocities were finding its way out of Germany during the last years of the regime. But the world came to know the reality only after the war ended. The sufferings of the Jews shook the world. The atrocities and sufferings that the Jews had endured during the Nazi killing operations were called the Holocaust. The Jews wanted the world to know about their sufferings. They recorded their experiences in diaries, notebooks, and kept archives. When the Nazi leadership sensed defeat in the war, it distributed petrol to its functionaries to destroy all evidence against them in offices. Summary. Let us summarize what we have learned. The parliamentary parties of Germany met at Weimar and established a democratic constitution with a federal structure. The World War I devastated Europe. It became a continent of debtors. The Spartakists founded the Communist Party of Germany. The economic crisis of 1923 heightened political radicalization. In 1929, the Wall Street Exchange crashed and America withdrew its financial support to Germany. The Great Economic Depression began in 1929. Hitler rose to power in 1932 and in phases dismantled the structure of democracy. World War II came to an end in May 1945 with Hitler's defeat and the USA dropping atom bomb on Hiroshima, Japan. Nazi ideology considered Aryans to be the finest race and the Jews the worst. According to Hitler, the undesirables included Jews, Gypsies, blacks, Russians, Poles, and even mentally or physically unfit Germans. Hitler used war as a means for genocide. Hitler influenced the youth with Nazi ideology. Hitler believed women to be the bearers of the Aryan culture and race. The Nazi regime used language and media with great care to camouflage their heinous activities. The ordinary people thought that Nazism alone could bring them prosperity. Those who resisted Nazi ideology were faced with brutal repression and death. The knowledge